Good
I think,
yeah,
sorry,
we start.
I think so.
Good evening, everyone. It is my privilege to welcome you all on a panel organized by Gender Equity Network South Asia, GENSA, a special interest group of the community of evaluators South Asia that includes Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. Today, we are hosting a panel at the Global 2024 on alternative methodologies in development evaluation with our esteemed panelists. I take this opportunity to welcome the panelists who have led evaluations by deeply engaging with alternative methods in development evaluation. Each of them bring with them over decades of experience in the field of evaluation. Dr. Sonal Zaveri, the founder and regional coordinator of GENSA. She's an independent consultant in evaluation, strategic planning, and capacity building, and brings over 25 years of cross-cultural experiences. Dr. Sonal specializes in transformative participatory outcome mapping and also utilize focused evaluations with special expertise in gender, HIV, health, education sectors, and she has worked with vulnerable populations with the focus on girls and women, including violence against women. Dr. Shram is a professor in social sciences at IRMA. He holds a PhD in political science from the Institute of Social and Economic Change, Bangalore. He was a research scholar in residence at the University of Antwerp in Belgium, 2018. He has been engaged in various evaluation and research assignments with UNICEF, the World Bank, NABARD, the state and central governments. He is now the editor of Asia Pacific Journal of Evaluation. Dr. Singh is the co-chair of Consortium of Institutions on M&E Education in Asia and Asia Pacific. He is also the team leader for building partnerships under Regional Evaluation Strategy, Asia Pacific Evaluation Association. We also have with us Mr. Pradeep Narayanan, who is the advisor for Praxis Institute for Participatory Practice. He's a practitioner of participatory methods and approaches in research and evaluation for over 2 decades. Pradeep works around areas of decolonization, ethics, participatory research, ESG, business and human rights, and sustainable development. Dr. Shweta is a seasoned development practitioner and who has transitioned from academia to working as an independent consultant. She brings with her over 15 years of rich experience in research and evaluation. With a doctoral degree in participatory communication and impact assessment from the University of Delhi, her expertise lies in evaluating ICT for the interventions in gender, health, participatory communications, M&E, and also designing social and behavioral change campaigns. She is currently engaged with CGIAR and also holds a prestigious position as a board member of the COE South Asia. I would now like to welcome Dr. Sonal Zaveri to share her insights on outcome mapping.
Thank you, Neha, for that very kind introduction. And if you stop sharing, I'll load my presentation. Thank you, everyone, for joining from wherever you are, from whatever part of the world. And we are really excited to talk about these alternative methodologies. And we hope that we can have a rich discussion about the use of it and what is if you have used other sort of methodologies, you can share some of your experiences as well. So what I'm going to be talking about today is not just outcome mapping, but outcome mapping plus. And the plus that we are adding is because we want to disrupt outcome mapping, and we want to add that plus and equate it with equity, gender, and social justice. So how are we going to do that? So just to give a bit of a background, gender and equity was not specifically built in the design of outcome mapping. Many of you who are listening in may know something about outcome mapping or may have used it as well. So when we began on this journey, we did a survey in 2017 to understand, who was using outcome mapping, if they had concerns about gender and equity, and a number of them came up. then we also began to look at what were some principles and practices that we could look at if we wanted to do equity and gender transformation. And then in 2020, we started thinking more about it and engaging with the community, the outcome mapping community, to talk about what could be some of the guiding practices to use outcome mapping to support transformational change. As you will see, we began to then think about, you have to think about transformation if you're going to talk about gender and equity. So through these various dialogues that we were having, we began to identify why we need to talk about transformation. And we believe that that is absolutely fundamental if we want to talk about gender and equity. And so we defined transformation as making specific choices. Because outcome mapping is all about choice, we try to use a similar language, but in the consideration of gender and equity. And because Heidi, my colleague, also from outcome mapping and a former steward of the community, she has different concerns in the global north. So she wanted to also talk about anti-racism, anti-oppression, and inclusion. And you will see that the common thread in all of this is power imbalances. So when we talk about power, the analysis is now central to outcome mapping plus. It wasn't there in outcome mapping. So many of you may be familiar that power is not a monolith. It can be formal and visible, and we are aware of laws, rules, and institutions that hold this power. But there is also a lot of hidden power, a shadow power that's really working behind the scenes. And these interests often control and influence transformation. And then you have these very invisible powers, which are these norms, these beliefs, culture. And again, they work right behind the scenes. But we need to address them if we want to talk about transformation. So our journey, when we started to add gender and equity, we wanted to keep the framework of outcome mapping because it has been tested over more than 20 years. But we wanted to add this plus element of social justice, equity, and gender. So as you can see, there were 4 core concepts in outcome mapping, which was outcome is understood as changes in behavior. There is a sphere of influence in the sense that outcome mapping is very clear what you can influence and what you cannot. So we continued with that boundary of influence, and we set those actor-centered boundaries. And that is, as many of you know, is fundamental in outcome mapping. And we also, in terms of outcomes, we're looking at contributions and not attributions. But we added that 5th dimension, which is we recognize and we have to address power dynamics and inequalities. And I will talk a little bit about how we've changed a bit of the architecture of outcome mapping. So when you look again at the outcome mapping principles, you can very clearly see that they are gender neutral, equity neutral. And what we did, we adapted these principles with a very, very sharp focus on equity and transformation. So on the left, you can see the outcome mapping principles. People contribute to their own well-being. But we also know that that's not, it's not a level playing field. And so we've talked about equity deserving people will contribute to their own well-being when they have the knowledge and the skills to contribute and to influence and make these decisions. The second principle, social policy and systems change, depends on changes in human behavior, because that's what outcome mapping says. It said no matter you talk of systems, institutions, it's finally that person who is going to change and going to impact that system. So we said, no, it's not just systems, it's equitable system changes that is going to depend on transformative changes in human behavior. So it's not just any change in human behavior. The third principle, sustained improvements in people's lives or environments, depends on relationships. And here we've talked of authentic relationships between diverse systems, diverse peoples and institutions in the system. So again, we are very, very, very clear that we are basing the change of OM plus in terms of equity, diversity, leading to transformation. So we have now a step 0. So those who are familiar with outcome mapping will realize that we never had this power mapping. And the power mapping is now, there are many ways to do a power analysis. This is one example of it. But what we are saying, it's absolutely fundamental that you do a power analysis, understand who are the actors in the system, who have high influence, low influence, who have, high power, low power. So again, as I said, you can use any form of power analysis, and that has to be at step 0. Most of you know about boundary partners. That outcome mapping talks about boundary partners, whether they are the NGOs you're working with and then who work with the beneficiaries. They are the ones who we believe are the ones that we work with in order to impact change. Now, in the boundary partners, it was pretty neutral. But here we are asking, okay, you're selecting boundary partners. Are the right people in the room? Have we looked at those who have been left behind? Have we included them? Are they representative of gender and equity intersections? Has the project determined, how important they are if you want to achieve that overall vision and mission? Is the representation tokenistic? Are there enough people in the room, not just 1 or 2? And do other boundary partners who are our change agents, do they understand why we are doing this, why we need to have marginalized people, and why their experience is important? So there are a number of questions in the selection of boundary partners. We also introduced a new category of powerful partners. So outcome mapping has boundary partners and strategic partners. Strategic partners are those that are important, and you have to, keep them informed. But here we are saying that there are powerful actors which we must influence or understand that they may not be allies and they may be a source of risk and backlash. And so we have to have very careful monitoring strategies. And all of you who have worked in the area of gender inequity know that a backlash and a risk is always inherent in what we do. So we have to look at these formal and informal power holders, visible and hidden. And that is why we have the step 0. As we have been mentioning, the progress markers were expect to see, like to see, love to see. And I know many of you may be using just progress markers, a very light version of outcome mapping. But we've added a 4th one, which is not like to see and a backlash, so that we are monitoring them and evaluating not just as unintended outcomes, but very clearly looking at what we don't want to see and as backlashes. So here is a summary of what is outcome mapping and what is outcome mapping plus. So as mentioned, it's not power explicit in outcome mapping. We've made it power explicit. In outcome mapping, we only ask what behavior has changed, but here we're very clear. We want to track transformative behavior. Progress markers generally are on incremental positive change. We've added the backlash, the negative change, the not like to see. And finally, we have these 2 actors in outcome mapping, and we've had the 3rd one, which is powerful actors. So hope to have your reflections and comments. There is a paper out here that explains in further detail, and here is the reference. Please do have a look at it and try to use it to make it more robust. Outcome mapping plus, and we'll be very happy to learn from you. What are your experiences? So please do share with us. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sonal. Can I now request Dr. Sham to share briefly a few ideas about outcome mapping?
Sure. Thank you, Neha. Thank you, Sonalji, for fantastic presentation, and I think you have addressed the real question of the power. I would pick one form of power which you talked about was invisible power in terms of the norms, belief, and culture. And that makes outcome mapping not only a project-specific method, but as a part of the project or intervention design. And more, I mean, of course, I have seen in some cases where people use it just to evaluate the project or to find out the impact. But I think it is prudent that it's a part of the design and before the program starts, because dealing with the norms, beliefs, and culture is basically not a short-term agenda. We cannot influence people in a short time. So I think what will happen is if we address the power, if you bring in within your design, what it does, it actually creates a system where you can address these issues in a longer term. So to me, it's basically a fundamental requirement of implementing any participatory evaluation methodology, including outcome mapping. And I think it should be part of the design instead of bringing at the end of the project. Now, there are 2-3 things which outcome mapping, and you have discussed very well about those mapping. Recently, what I have seen that the people have also, they were talking about that the outcome mapping also throws focus or lights on causal, contribution, and support. So what we know from the literature that the OM actually look at contribution more rather than attribution. That I think that is not debatable. But I have seen recently where people were talking about that if you start with the contribution, if you then look at what support it provides, maybe you can also look at the causal relation as well. That, okay, because of these things, so I think, if I look at the sequencing, then it's contribution, supportive, and then causal. Some of the literature is also available, but I have not seen any evidence to support that. But there are people who are talking about these things. Lastly, outcome mapping is very sensitive towards people's relation and the organization working with people. And that is where it does not really create much of the impact if external organization, even if it is a funding agency or commissioning agency, is too much into your day-to-day implementation, is too much into bringing the top-down approach, top-down methods. And that's where this outcome mapping basically, it does not provide what you want to achieve. So if it is a people-centric, if it works well with the people's organization, it has to be pretty much used to co-design, co-implement, and co-use. Now, I am giving more emphasis on co-use because usually we see the example of co-design, co-implement. But what happens after that? What happens when you have the results in your hand? Who is going to get corrected? Who is going to look after that they sustain for a longer time? Now, co-use can only be done by the community. Why I'm saying this, because if I am today the Department of Watershed Development, for 5 years I have implemented Pradhan Mantri, Sinchai Yojana. After 5 years, it's not my head. It's Sarpanch, it's Panchayat. So the whole idea of the co-use go away. Outcome mapping, in my opinion, adds one more aspect, is the co-use. Co-design is there, co-implementation is there, and the co-use has to be also part of this. So I find your presentation addressing the problem which is pretty much there, which is about the power. And I think if we use the framework, and if we follow this, the co-reflection or co-creation idea, I'm sure it will give fantastic results for any evaluator who uses it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Sham. I would now request Pradeep to please share his presentation.
Thank you, Neha. Is it possible for you to upload the presentation?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Sonal. Thank you, Jensa, for this opportunity. And as usual, I think it was wonderful to hear from Sonal on the outcome mapping, and I'm going towards the outcome mapping plus, which she evolved. And I think taking from there, I would say, this is a program which we are doing, which we call it as Sindhanai, and there is a last 1 year, almost a year, we have been working on this. Primarily, the area of our work is to understand collectivization process. And as a person coming from measurement community, after 1 year, if I reflect upon it, I will say we have been, I would say a lot of our own reflection says that a lot of blind spot as an evaluator, as a measurement community, we always had on while measuring the collectivization. So therefore, this presentation is primarily about some of the mistakes which we probably used to do earlier, which I thought I would point out as we started learning that process. Next slide. We all know that grant makers today are now showing keen interest to support collectivization process, and some support social movements, while others use the strategy of localization or self-help groups or user groups or campaigns or networks. I think these are some of the terms which are all often supported by grant makers. Our worry is that, what Shyam pointed out, that the essence of any collective at the end is the ownership of the work or the program which they are doing. If they do not have ownership of the activities they are doing, the challenge will be that the entire ecosystem of market, colonialism, global development aid, capitalism will just leverage these groups to position their own ideology. While it is good that these collectives now have access to resources, the challenges are that these collectives may get projectized over the next few years. Our worry is to do that, to make some of these collectives understand that. Over the year, I think we have met a number of collectives and social movements, and some of the movements, migrant movements we met in Southeast Asia, helped us with a historical transect of example, where they said that how their movement over a period due to the funding system got NGOized over the years in the early part of the century. And it's an important learning which most of us may be unconsciously doing with even self-help groups, how we are, why it's only the measurement community and an academic community, which often may not have reflected on many things, which is important. It is in this context, as part of this program, we reached out to a lot of collectives. And the next slide. First, we had an interesting discussion. Next slide. We had an interesting discussion with the grant makers. And what we realized were some of the questions which the grant makers ask. I'm not able to see this next slide. Is it?
I'm just sorry. You give me 1 second.
No issue. So some of the questions which the grant makers often ask when they meet the collective is simply like, where are the youth in your movement? Where is the second line? Why is your leadership team not diverse? What is your sustainability plan? I think these are very common questions which are asked. Now, these are the same questions often they ask the NGOs also, right? And with an NGO, what an NGO does is, because due to the funding system, an NGO can actually give salary and recruit some women or youth into the board or the team, right? But the struggle of the social movement is not like that. It's a both inward as well as outward. And often the grant makers do not necessarily have patience to bring the change. And worse, as a measuring community, some of us may not even look at it from that dimension. So it is important for us to understand how the collectives operate. Yeah, next slide. Today, I'm going to provide a glimpse of that tool. Is it?
There is some issue, just not moving.
Okay. What I can do is let me present from my slide.
Yes, I think that would be better. Sorry for this.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, some of the glimpse of it is what we tried to understand by reading many collectives was that some of the parameters which we tried to evolve was like one is the context is important. And second, for that collective, what is its ideology is important. And the third one, what Sonal was saying in the stakeholder, which is largely the power relationships is important. And this is about the collective's interface vis-a-vis the external world. But within it, what is the intersectionality is important, and how to assess their strength is important, and also how to prevent projectization is important. We looked at it from a 6 parameters. But before that, it was also important for us to understand how to define a social movement, because you have often a challenge in terms of what is collective and what is a social movement. People tend to call everything as social movement or everything as collective. So, and that as a measurer, as an evaluator, whenever we see any collective, we are always tempted to first understand what is the structure to understand that collective. If they don't understand the structure, they feel very tense. What I am going to measure, I have to first understand the structure. And similarly, a grant maker will also love a structure, because then only they will need to know whom to talk to, right? It is the same tension which is there in our monitoring and evaluation also. If we try to find a collective, first try to find what its structure is. So there comes the challenge, because often a movement is I would say, some of them are very loosely organized network. Some of them will have a defined structure. But often if we go into greater detail, you will see an analogy of a wave which is very fluid in terms of the social movement. And often this wave is, when it flows, it often goes within many of the loose structure. And sometimes it forms a very, very defined structure. Sometimes it has many branches. At some point of time, it is a small structure and loose structure and defined structure. So the idea here is to often, if you start restricting yourself to measure only the structure of a social movement, which is like a wave, you might probably have a mistake in the beginning itself when you try to develop a methodology of measuring the social movement. The second mistake which we often do is the complexity part of it. When we measure a social movement, we are measuring something of that collective at that moment of time, right? And we make many judgment of it. It is something like here, you measure the boat, the movement of the boat, right? And you zoom in on the boat and you measure it. But literally what you might actually miss out is the journey in which the boat has traveled and the journey it has to travel. So that changing context and the changing pace of it is often missed in the measurement, because we often focus at the moment what is happening in the collective, and that becomes the focus. If we are doing it, that is probably a second error, which I would see a lot of us will be doing it.
Oh, sorry to interrupt, but Pradeep, we just have 2 more minutes.
Okay, the third one is with respect to the fact that we often look at the social movement from a invisible whole, because a lot of things are diverse within the movement, and we expect like a social movement means everybody has to be feminist movement. Dalit and movement means everyone will be there into it. But it is possible there is a lot, it's not a monolith, and people will be traveling the journey into it. And I think the last one, which I would look at it from a complexity point of view, is the fact that we try to evolve a measurement framework, which is like a net. And in that, what gets in the net is probably a very small part of the measure which we have to measure. Often what we leave out the net is something which we want to measure, which we should ideally measure. So therefore, we keep that complexity, and it becomes very true for a movement, because it is a very fluid nature of the way it moves in. Last one in terms of it is that for every evaluator, for scaling up, what we need to know is the fact that what is the origin of of a movement? What is the origin of certain things? Because we like to scale up at the origin only, we'll get to know why the movement has come into existence so that it could be scaled up. But that is the biggest problem probably in most of the movement, is because the origin is simply immeasurable, because a lot of things happen in that context. There are many waves of many movements, many kind of a system which all are coming in. And in that, there is some small tempest which actually triggers that movement. It is very difficult to identify that. So I would say there's a lot more into it, but I will stop here for lack of time. But the idea here is that the complexity with which the social movement works, and with the ease many of us measure it, is I think there is a lot of distance between it. So therefore, I think it's like a camera person who tries to capture a running athlete. The camera person has to move at the same speed as a social movement to actually measure it. Otherwise, you will not be able to measure that. It is almost like that. A measurer has to be an integral part of the movement to really understand the movement, and should travel at the same pace. I'll stop here. Sorry for taking enough time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Pradeep. It's always a pleasure listening to you. And I would now request Dr. Sham to share a few ideas about collectivization and measurement.
Just 2 points, Neha, very quickly. I think it's a very good presentation, Pradeep ji. You have brought out a few, misconception about the collectives, which people more often have to deal with, and sometimes they ignore them. Number one, collectives are not only a mechanism; they are also an end in themselves. Now, more often what we do is that we use collective as just a mechanism to find out to achieve something. The great example is SSG, self-help group. Nobody knows, there's no data, of course, anecdotal references are there, that if we have a 35 lakhs or, even more than that SSG in one state, what is happening with those small SSGs? Everybody is thinking that, okay, if there are SSG, then NRLM will be successful. The women, the income will be higher, but nobody knows what is happening in those tiny groups, 12 women, 11 women. What is there? Is there a deliberative democracy there? Is there deliberation happening? Is there a collective decision making is taking place? So I think it's only treating as a mechanism, but not as an end, is one of the problem that is there with the collective related research and evaluation. Number two, collectives are very organic. They cannot be treated as, that we can treat them at a scale. And great example is FPO. FPO, the people say, okay, 1,000 members, 2,000 members, 3,000 members. No, they are very organic. Some collectives are meant to be small. Some collectives cannot go beyond a range. And if we follow the idea of that, no, they have to be a range, you have to have a number, what is going to happen is you can engage with them. There could be some growth. And if there is a growth in membership, they're going to be bureaucratization and they're going to be decline. So I think we also need to see that in our research design, in our evaluation, in our approach, we need to take this as an organic approach. And then we see what exactly they want to do, how they have emerged, and what they want to achieve. So I think these are two important points I just wanted to, there's a lot about social movement, but I'm sure we don't have time. Otherwise, I could have spoken about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sham. Thank you so much for those words. I would now request Shweta to please share her presentation on social network analysis.
Yeah, thank you, Neha. Just give me a moment.
Could you please unmute?
Yeah. Was it visible? Are you able to see the screen?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Neha. Thank you, Professor Sham, Mr. Pradeep and Sonal for giving me this opportunity. Okay, so dear participants, as we are sitting today to discuss alternate methodologies with a key objective to brainstorm how development initiatives can be made more effective, efficient, and sustainable, integration of social network analysis into evaluation frameworks has emerged as a powerful tool. Today, as I begin with my presentation and we delve into this topic, let's just first unravel the basic foundation concept of social network analysis and its relevance in the realm of developmental evaluation. And let's just try and understand how participatory methodologies and SNA can be integrated together. Now, developmental evaluation, as we all understand, is an evaluative approach which focuses on supporting the development of innovative programs and initiatives in an entirely complex dynamic environment. It is, in fact, an excellent fit for all the programs involving uncertainty, systems change, and complexity. So, there are certain key features which we all are aware of, like adaptability, continuous learning, collaborative approach, systems thinking, innovation, utilization focus, and context sensitivity. We all understand that developmental evaluation as an approach adapts to the evolving needs and context of the program. We also understand that it acknowledges the importance of the context in shaping the program outcomes and effectiveness. Now, developmental evaluation, therefore, can be seen as a very responsive approach to understand and improve any complex intervention. Social network analysis is a method to map, visualize, and analyze relationships and interactions within a given network. Now, the power of SNA lies in its ability to map, visualize, and analyze the relationships, interactions within a given network. Integrating SNA as a method in the field of developmental evaluation is largely based upon two key tenets, as I see. One is its participatory approach, and second is the ability to visualize these relationships. Now, participatory methodologies and social network analysis can indeed be seamlessly integrated to empower stakeholders throughout this evaluation process. Unlike traditional methods, SNA rather seeks to involve stakeholders in the entire process, fostering ownership, engagement, and trust. Now, combining participatory methodologies with SNA techniques therefore entails involving these stakeholders in research or evaluation stages through workshops, focus group discussions, and interviews, while also identifying who the key stakeholders are, their relationships within a given network, and this entire process fosters a sense of ownership and empowerment among these stakeholders. Secondly, SNA helps visualize these relationships. Now, by allowing visual representations of how the connections are spaced, highlighting key players, flows of different information communication patterns within a network is essential. Integrating these participatory methods with SNA therefore combines qualitative insights from discussions we may have had with stakeholders and the quantitative data about the network structure. Now, this integration will help us provide a comprehensive understanding of a network dynamics. So there is co-creation of solutions. By integrating SNA, the stakeholders can identify who are the key actors within a network to develop targeted interventions or strategies that can leverage existing relationships to promote further collaboration and co-creation. Thus, utilization of SNA as an alternative methodology in developmental evaluation is beneficial as it facilitates investigating interrelationships among different entities, stakeholders, or events in a very holistic and innovative manner. Now, a simple question that often comes to our mind is how and when to use SNA. Now, SNA can be used in varying ways. To begin with, you can use this as a diagnostic tool to during a situational analysis in the beginning of a program or a project design. Further, since SNA is applicable to all kinds of networks, ranging from big to small, from local to global, therefore, you can use SNA to plan, create another plan, support an existing plan, and even monitor the progress of the existing program or project. Lastly, and most commonly, SNA has been used as an evaluation tool to assess the changes that has happened over a time due to an intervention, because it provides a wealth of information to determine the entire course of action. Now, looking from this perspective, we can say there are definite advantages of using SNA in developmental evaluation. One of the biggest advantages that lies is its ability to capture changes over time, allowing for an ongoing adaptation and refinement of strategies. Secondly, it helps to identify key influential actors who can help, therefore, catalyze or impede progress of an initiative. SNA has also been used to map and analyze knowledge networks and communities of practice. As it is already evident that attaining significant and long lasting improvements of different levels require an intersectoral approach between organizations that focus on, for example, water and sanitation, maternal and child health, education. Therefore, we can use SNA as an evaluation tool to describe intersectoral collaborations between these organizations. It has also been used by different organizations for mobilization during the program implementation and also for influencing the policy. A very quick look at the key methodological steps. Very first step, we must determine the objectives of evaluation. Now, to collect data for SNA, we need to first be very clear and decide what is it that we wish to assess. Is the evaluation assessing the effectiveness of collaborative efforts, identifying key collaborators, or understanding collaboration patterns within a broader network? What is our unit of analysis? Whether it is a group, an institution, or it's a mix of entities, whether those entities are a part of a network or they are outside the network. So we must first be very clear of what is the objective of our study. Then we should also be very clear of the fact that whether it is about a particular network that we want to study, or we want to study a network around a particular node. So once we are clear of these objectives of our evaluation, we then move on to data collection. Now, for data collection, it can be done through observation, institutional archives, digital traces, and even primary methods like surveys, focus group discussions, and interviews. Then, once we have the data from the ground, we can actually process the data and construct a network structure. And thereafter, this network structure gets fed for the further analysis and interpretation. We have certain case studies where SNA has been used as a very powerful tool to evaluate certain programs. Say, for example, one of the community organizations have implemented a youth empowerment program. Now, this organization conducted SNA workshops with the program participants to identify who are the central figures who can help them in the implementation of their program. What are the gaps in communication that they need to address, and what are further opportunities for collaboration. Similarly, in a recent example, CGIR, which is world's largest agricultural research consortium, has utilized SNA to comprehend the relevance and effectiveness of the GeneBank platform. Now, they conducted this SNA with the GeneBank staff, external and internal organizational partners, to identify who are the key influential players, highlight the relevance and effectiveness of the GeneBank platform, and identify certain gaps that they need to fill. Lastly, and very interestingly, SNA has also been used in disaster-induced resettlements to understand and evaluate the network principles. And some of the very interesting recommendations that came out from these was an understanding of how network dynamics can help in understanding the land and modifying rather the land compensation policies and promoting inclusion of less privileged groups in the communities. So these are very few examples. There are many others. Now, all said and done, we all understand that SNA can be a real potential tool in the entire developmental evaluation sphere. It involves stakeholders in the evaluation process and empowers them to drive change from within their own networks, leading to more sustainable outcomes through their own collaboration and ownership. However, there are certain plug points that we need to consider. Some of them are listed here. One is ethical consideration. Like in any other method, when we are conducting SNA, we need to be very cautious of keeping the privacy and confidentiality of the participants. So, obtaining informed consent, ensuring the data remains anonymized is extremely important. Similarly, ensuring that the participants in the network are selected from the entire network and include diverse groups of stakeholders is extremely important. So factors like age, gender, socioeconomic status, and their roles within the intervention need to be taken into consideration. Thereafter, network boundaries. So ensuring that the participants in the network represent the boundaries. We should be able to understand and define clearly which network do we want to analyze and study. Thereafter, as we have already been focusing back and forth through our evaluation, and this is something that we have already understood through our practices, that we must triangulate the data that we get in order to ensure that there is high quality data that is collected from ground. Very interestingly and very important, we need to build capacities of the people who engage in this entire process of social network analysis so that they're able to utilize this for their own benefit. And lastly, integrating social network analysis with other methods is of extreme importance. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shweta. I think the methodology itself sounds very exciting. Since we have Dr. Sham with us, who's also an expert on social network analysis. Would you please share your insights on, using SNA and how our evaluation community could benefit from this?
Thank you, Neha. Thank you, Shweta. I think it's a very good presentation, and use of SNA for evaluation is also a very new approach. We have been using SNA for understanding community behavior, and that's where it is linked with what Pradeep ji was presenting. But I must tell, or rather, I must warn also that while it's a very good method, it's a very flexible and fragile also. So when I'm saying it's a very flexible, it allows you to understand the behavior of of the different actors. At the same time, it also fragile in the sense that it might not allow you to generalize the findings from one context to another. And that is where I think it is such an important tool compared to other tools, which actually where you can take findings and say, okay, in this context, this finding is applicable. I always tell this, for example, in a very simple terms, if because of this event that we are doing today, and if I start out of 38 people, if there are 8 people who started talking to each other about the OM, about the SNA, it's a very good impact. The density of around 2%, 3%, or 10% is a very good density for SNA. But if you are working in the same office, 38 of us, and then only 8 people are talking, then it's a very bad density. So what SNA does, it allows you to immerse into the local context, and then explain that how networks are behaving, and that behavior, whether it has any impact on the individual centric outcomes or not. So I think excellent method, excellent way of approaching the collectives. No other method allows you to understand the behavior. Every method allows you, or rather push you, to understand the behavior through the individual centric outcomes. So the moment you say an RLM is successful, the only thing you would be looking at the income level, the savings, etc., but nobody looks at how women are behaving. Are they really talking politics? Are they talking religion? Are they talking household decision making? None of the method allows you to do that other than SNA. So I think this is extremely good method. It is very flexible, at the same time also fragile. So we need to be quite clear and careful where we need to use it. That's what I had to, Shweta is also expert in SNA, I can understand. Very good research. I have gone through your CGIR paper also. It's nicely done. So, and proposing it for evaluation methodology is a great step. I think definitely there's a lot of work to be done ahead, but it's a great step, and people can use it as one of the evaluation methodology. That's it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sham. I would request our members who've joined us, if you have any questions for any of the panelists, if there's anything that you would like to share, clarify?
While we are waiting, I have a question. Because, Pradeep was talking about, the various difficulties of measuring the movements. Would you say that it is critical that the evaluator is internal within the movement, or have somebody inside building their evaluative capacity, and an evaluator with some expertise to be a mentor, and would that work? And my second question is that, is it possible to use something like social network analysis for movements?
Pradeep would want to answer first. Or should I go there?
Very interesting question in that sense that, is an internal person is required to measure it in terms of it. But, a movement or a network or a collective it's not just about the members who are part of it, right? Collective, for example, a feminist movement can reside in anybody's home, right? Because the movement has actually moved. The aim is that the movement has actually traveled in such a way that it has gone into various people's homes, various academic departments, and everywhere. So I would say that, therefore, internal or external is often seen from a very limited sense of, again, that structure which is there, right? And structure is only one part of the way, right? But who is internal or external is, I'm using the word ideology, which we normally do not like to use it, right? It is important an evaluator appreciates the ideology of the movement or collective, right? And it is important to find out that thing, and that will create whether you are an internal or external to that movement. Like, for example, if a feminist movement is evaluated by a movement which is a women empowering movement, but within patriarchy, you have those aspects of shades of, then you will have a challenge in that way. So therefore it is, and secondly, within the movement also, it is, you will find the shades of various diversity of ideologies. So therefore, I think what we try to find out is that what is important is, in any movement you will have at a higher level, it's like a pyramid kind of a thing. At a higher level, there will be a thinkers, whereas there will be doers, and there will be people who are just wider members, right? Our aim is to how, instead of pyramid, it becomes a cylinder kind of a thing. And that's the analogy which we try to use to, an evaluator is actually a part of a movement in the wider sense, but at the same time should be able to get a bird's view on that. So I don't know whether I answered the question, but I think that's a challenge which we have. That's also a part of complexity.
And yes, can I come in? Yeah, so basically, yes, it is important to understand and rather flag this, that often we tend to use SNA in a very oversimplified manner or in a very overwhelming manner, which is something we should be a little conscious of when we're using SNA, even in the development sphere. Coming to the point that whether SNA can be used to study movements like feminist movements, yes, it can be. Given we have clarity on what do we really want to study. So if we really want to study how information is flowing within that network, how it has contributed to the overall impact in the lives of the women, we can combine SNA along with other qualitative methods to come out with a very beautiful analysis. One very important, or rather a very interesting thing that can be done is that SNA can help you incorporate intersectional perspectives and understand how factors like race, class, sexuality, and geography are intersecting with feminist networks. This is something that can be very interestingly done. If I really don't know whether I answered the question, but yes, that was just an attempt.
Hello, may I ask one question?
Yes, Akujan, please. Yeah.
My name is Akujam, and I have a question for Pradeep as well as anyone can answer it. Is there any role? Is there any role of influencers in collectivizations or social movement? This is the first one, and another one is I have need little clarifications. What is the best possible way to measure collectivizations?
Would any of the panelists want to take that question?
I'm sorry, I'm not able to hear the question. I was not able to, but if somebody else has here, please respond. Yeah, thank you.
I think I can respond. I think the question was the role of influencer in collectivization. Yes, definitely. The only thing is this: how we define influencer. If leaders are always influencer. I mean, I'm not talking about the YouTube influencer nowadays. I mean, that's a very different kind of. But definitely, any collective needs a very strong leadership. And studies on, particularly done through SNA, has proven that while the very basis of any democratic collectivization needs the democratic, the decision making, decentralization, but it also needs very strong leadership to run it. So, you might find that it's very contrary, but you need very good, capable influencer to really manage a collective. Second question, could not hear. I don't know what it was about. Sorry.
The second question is on what would be the best way or like an appropriate way to measure collectivization, given your experiences, like if that can be.
Sweta is sitting here, is SNA. I mean, one of the method, of course, is SNA. That it's very important, not only you can understand any collective through SNA just as a mechanism of change. You can also understand and studies as an end, as an outcome. So to me, collectivization is a mechanism of change. At the same time, is also an outcome. If the social capital grows, if social capital accumulates, for me, it's an outcome. Of course, depends on my objective, what I want to see. So SNA is probably potential method to understand, because it allows you to understand behavior than individual centric characteristics. That is how it is quite effective. Yeah.
Pradeep, would you like to share your thoughts?
While any measurement system always has its own pluses and minuses, one thing I just want to add is our history of creating evaluation framework has been based on measurement of projects, NGOs, programs, and from a colonial mindset and an attitude which is about top-down flow of funds and seeking accountability for it. So therefore, I would definitely say that we need to have a reflection on any of these frameworks which has come into existence, and always try to start afresh. Let us not get imprisoned to any framework. While you go to if you are measuring a collective which is strong enough to push an agenda, political agenda, it is strong enough to help you with a framework also. If we do not trust a collective to evolve its own framework, I think we are trying to do that top-down thing into that collective, right? So therefore, it's just I would say it would look like an utopian or romantic thing, but it is possible. I would love to say that any framework which is existing today has its own colonial mindset ingrained in it, which we all have perpetrated it. So I would say, let us just look at it from an angle of Dalit, from an angle of feminism, from an angle of socialism, and build a concept which it can create it. Otherwise, we might unconsciously erring on that scenario. I'm not a big votary of I'm not against SNA per se, but I'm against any kind of a predetermined framework to go to the community and push it through a framework. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Pradeep. So one question I wanted to ask, like if there are like, I'm not not too many questions there. So I just wanted to ask one thing, right? Like if we are working with large institutions, say, Sham, you mentioned that the NRLM or SHGs, if one is to look at measurement of how effective have, say, certain aspects of such large institutions been at a state level, or like how would you even measure effectiveness, right? So what would then, like I agree with what Pradeep is saying, that it has to be bottom up and we really need to make it very, it has to be something that evolves, but then what would your idea be on, like, say, large scale, scalable, or the kind of programs that the government runs? Like how would one look at measuring effectiveness of initiatives? If you could share your thoughts on that.
You want an answer from Pradeep ji first, or?
No,
It's fine.
Fine. Yeah, go ahead, please, Shamji.
No, I think, see, if the program is of that scale, certainly you need to have some pre-decided structure, because otherwise you may not. And that's where I think one of the, which I wanted to speak because there was no time, that is where we have been talking about the sustainability of participatory methods. One of the criticism of the participatory method was, while I use those methods myself, is that they are very weak in terms of external generalization, but they're very strong in terms of internal validity. So the relation between cause and effect is very strong if you do it locally. Now, this argument is defeated if you take a very large scale state level or central level kind of intervention, because then you cannot go to 7 lakh villages and actually do a PRA, or actually do a quality of life map or narrative. You have to have a certain pre-designed indicators. Now, that is where the localization of this participatory method is really important, because then probably you allow those 7 lakhs panchayats to try and work out their own ways of understanding SSGs or Mahila Sabhas or Bal Sabhas or whatever it is. So I think, if you ask me using the system thinking approach, I would say that it is possible to actually, develop such system locally, provided you have those public systems available at the local level. Now, when I say public system, I mean any community organization, formal or informal, or even Gram Panchayat or Gram Sabha. It can be done. But if that capacity or intention is not available, it's not there, then you need to have certain, pre-decided, indicator that you want to go ahead, and then you have. I'm not criticizing them. Probably when you're dealing with a big state, or whole country, you need to have certain specific, indicators and methods. But the problem with this is that then you cannot really promote, you cannot use the method that we have talked about today. They are very resource intensive. I have done several times PRAs, and I was limited to only 2 to 3 villages because I don't have resource and time to go to do it in 20 villages or 40 villages. It's such a method, and including OM or any other method for SNA. It's very difficult to collect data from 3 networks in 3 villages. It takes a lot of time, right? So yes, if you have a system in place, go decentralized way, it will work. If you don't have a system in place, well, you have to go a top-down approach. You have to have something in your hand and then see it, how effective it is. One last information, I'm sorry, I'm shooting out, the time. You have, because I was mentioning NRLM, in one state where I'm advising the state government on MNE, they have around 35 lakh household data available on membership of SSG. 35 lakh data point. And there has been no analysis, administrative data is available. There has been no analysis of this whatsoever. All the time analysis only for whether the saving has gone up, whether the the income has gone up. So if you do not have a method to really use those public systems and find out what is happening, it's of no use. You have to then go with the top-down approach. And that is my perspective. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sham. Pradeep, last 1 minute, and then we would like to wrap. Thank you so much.
No, I completely agree with what Shamji said, because my point of departure is only at the level that if a program is anyway top-down, the evaluation framework which has been evolved for top-down framework will work. We don't have to worry about it, right? My problem is only that evaluation frameworks have not yet been evolved for a bottom-up approach. So if we use an evaluation framework which has been created in a setting which is of top-down and use it to measure a bottom-up process, I feel there is a challenge. That's what I said. It's about measuring. Collectivization is the only area where I feel that we have not progressed beyond what was there in MDGs, right? It's like 2 decades old. We are using the same frameworks which are there. But bottom-up approach, when the program is moving towards bottom-up approach and evaluators are still using the framework which has been evolved for top-down approach, I have a problem with it. So therefore, I'm saying a lot of work as an evaluation measurement community we have to do to push that debates around it. To act 3 decades ago, evaluators were ahead of the program. Evaluators were talking progressive ideologies, whereas program was way behind. Today, it is not the situation. Today, programs are much ahead of evaluators. They are actually talking about rights-based approach, collectivization, localization, etc. And an evaluator comes with an ancient thing and comes back with the same ideology and measures it and judges them and saying that, things are not working. So that's where my worry is. I'm not against any kind of a scale-up approach or model which is there, because any evaluation is a judgment and it has to be done through and you have only 3 months to do, 4 months to do. So you are going to have an imposed framework. But has our framework evolved? That is the question I want to reflect on. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pradeep. I would also take this opportunity to thank all our wonderful panelists, and special thanks to Dr. Sham for agreeing to join us as a discussant. I would want all of you to, if you've not already registered for GENSA, we've shared our link and also the website address. We've also shared the reports that, are available prepared by our panelists, and also there are resources that have been shared by the Praxis team on the Sindhani project. So it would be great if you can access those and also join GENSA. And we look forward to hosting more sessions for you all. Thank you very much. We had a great time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks a
you.
lot. Bye-bye.